Today on IT Unplugged, we sit down with Kevin Roberts of Proper Recruiting to see what it's like to recruit in the digital age.
At M2 Technology, we're on a mission to make IT accessible to everyone. Join us on our journey to demystify the ever-evolving world of business technology. Are you ready to get unplugged?
Welcome back to IT Unplugged. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Kevin.
Kevin, I'm super excited that you're here today because we're going to talk about just some great stuff with talent and how to find the right people. And but before we get into that, would you mind just introducing yourself a little bit, maybe your company and what you're all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Kevin Roberts, newer to the area. We moved here back in February and have been incredibly warmly welcomed. But my background is in recruitment, in headhunting, and done a lot of search in cybersecurity, data, you name it. Originally started out in Chicago. Myself, though, from the UK, been here for about 25 years. Just can't shake the accent still.
Yeah.
But started out in search back in Chicago and then spent about 7 years out in the Bay Area.
Okay.
Recently moved out this way and work with professionals in IT, software, data, products, a lot of different specialties across various different industries at the same time as well.
Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, it's first off to have that kind of diverse backgrounds and to also be in verticals that are really needed right now where you're finding that really great talent. Business is really relying on those people. And I know you kind of have a diverse background. You have, security certifications, was it philosophy and chemistry background as well. How does that kind of shape and differentiate you from maybe other people that are out there, different headhunters or different companies, and kind of change your mindset when you're looking for talent?
The technical discipline and landscape is just so much more vast than other forms of recruiting. So finance and accounting, which is, I would say, where recruiting and headhunting kind of originated, at least to what it is these days, is much more of a plug and chug type game. Whereas, as you know, the technology landscape is ever evolving and changing. So in being in this space, remaining ahead of the curve, and we're going to talk about security even further, is of the utmost importance. Knowing what's going on from a zero-day virus that's being released to knowing about open source technologies is very important. So yeah, my education is a little all over the place, to say the least, but it's given me an ability to reason on a psychological level with philosophy, and then with chemistry, the engineering type mindset, and just having a high intellectual curiosity. I think it's positioned me in a unique realm to really be able to help companies identify the right person for the challenges that they're seeking to hire for. Yeah. The cybersecurity certifications, I did flirt with that path going down that road back in San Francisco, and one of the programs for the city colleges was, as long as you were a resident, it was fully subsidized, which why not take advantage of that opportunity? So completed a couple of different certifications. One was more around networking with some light Python programming, and then the other one was definitely more geared towards application security.
Yeah. Do you think that's helpful when you're, meeting with talent and different people? Because I'll just say a little bit, from the M2 side, as we're a continued growing business, you have an HR professional that'll be in the room and they're like, I can't tell if this person's blowing smoke or if they really have the skills. You know what I mean? It's one of those difficult things because it's so complex. Do you think that kind of helps you when it comes to kind of figuring out like who's really speaking the truth or who can really do it and who can't?
Yeah, no, I do. I've been able to build myself an immense amount of credibility with engineering leaders in being able to identify what that technical roadmap and business challenge looks like. So back out west, I've worked with a lot of SaaS-based players where we were recruiting on site reliability engineering, automation, deployment for Kubernetes and orchestration-based platforms, where these get into pretty nuanced conversations when we're talking about deployments, different deployment methods, Canary method, blue-green, different things along those lines. And jobs and functions within businesses are so varied these days. I mean, a HR professional, and I commend them, it's not where my strength is, but they have so many different responsibilities, and especially in this area of the country where we have so much lower mid-market business, that person's probably being stretched beyond the recognition. So having a relationship with a headhunter that knows what might be a good idea for that size of the business, I think does offer some value and build some credibility.
Yeah, absolutely. I could see that. It's interesting that you talked about nuanced conversations and different things like that when it comes to maybe the recruiting. So I would assume, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're looking for very specific positions, there might be things that are more like skill-based. Like, hey, I need this person to have this person to contribute immediately, like with this skill. But I'm just kind of curious, is there like different traits that maybe you're looking for that's not just skill-based? Like, hey, I need a guy that can do X. But are there like kind of things that you recognize in people that you go, oh, that's going to make a good employee?
Yes, to answer the question head on. So I definitely spend most of my time in direct placements, and the companies that I work with will definitely hire on the soft skills and the high business acumen as well as the technical know-how of things. And again, I'm just going to come back to the point of some of the smaller companies that exist out there. And when I say smaller, I'm saying sub 200 headcount in general. Sure. But hiring for a technical position in this type of environment, I think, is really interesting because you have to have some global vision for the business, comprehensive understanding of a security plan, of planning for IT and resource allocation, as well as looking at a data strategy. Because we're evolving at a faster pace each and every year. And as companies start to get ready and think about embracing AI, that can only be done depending on the quality of the data and how they've developed the data strategy up front. And obviously security, we're talking about protecting assets, and that could be network infrastructure, but data is definitely the 21st century commodity that we need to be thinking of more. So yes, I look for the technical, and yes, I'm able to work through some questions and challenge and prompt the candidates I'm working with, but by no means does my process stop there.
Interesting. Okay. So you kind of talked about direct placement. And, you have this thing with proper recruiting where it's, I'm not going to abandon a search. Has there ever been, have you ever kind of been tested when it comes to this? Hey, I'm not going to abandon the search. And something that's been like really, really difficult. I don't need names or anything, but just like an experience like that.
For sure. And most all the work I do is going to be confidential. There's definitely some use cases and client-based situations that I can speak to, but proper recruiting has been built out of an understanding of what I see to be valuable towards clients. And walking away from searches is a pet peeve that I've seen in the recruitment industry over the past, slipping back into my old ways, talking about hospitality. 20 years in hospitality will do that. So recruiters and third-party agencies should be brought on for the most challenging hires. In allocating budget and spend for headhunters, it could be a confidential search, it could be a retained search. There's a few different situations, but in general, it's going to be what is referred to as the purple squirrel type search, and it might be a hybrid position in a combination of two different roles. It could be something that's very nuanced, and often early stage career recruiters will walk away out of frustration because they can't find what they're actually asking for. And some of this will come down to not being on the same page or understanding what is actually being sought after by the company. But some of it is just giving up too easily. So one of my commitments is I don't take on work lightly. I do see the long-term picture. Ideally, I would like to be working with a company for 3-5+ years and helping build that culture and help them solve their hiring pains at the same time. So never walked away from any clients that I've actually committed to. There have definitely been ones that I've got through the search and said, I'm not working with you again. But more often than not, it's panned out to be great. Essentially, those that I want to do business with are, I think in the first 3 meetings, you generally can discern who you want to do business with.
Okay.
Who represents your company, who carries your mission statement and values forward, and that's who we want to be at Proper Recruiting.
So you touched on 2 things, and we might go off on a little tangent here. But purple squirrel, okay. What is the purple squirrel search? Like, you kind of touched on it, but I've never even heard that term. So can you expand on that a little bit?
The purple squirrel is a known character per se in recruiting, in headhunting, and it's the unicorn or the one candidate that might exist for this position. So I've worked on some legacy mainframe COBOL searches in the past before, where they wanted this person to have specific industry experience and blah blah blah, and they might exist, but once you start getting to that narrow of a particularity from a technology stance, you're eliminating what I would deem to be those that are on the periphery or those that should certainly be considered for other qualities. I would much rather hire, yes, there's got to be a technical foundation, technical base for what the company is looking for, but hiring for tenacity, grit, and determination is a game changer. You want to hire those that can carry your mission forward, that can grow the business in a desirable way, and that offers themselves to be a little bit more malleable at the end of the day.
That's okay. So this is really interesting, and I kind of want to dig into it a little bit because, you say that there's these people. Let's say you meet with a company, and they want somebody that learns, knows Cobalt or XXX. What does that discovery meeting kind of look like between you and a company? Because is it one of those things where sometimes you can identify, hey, I want this person that knows Cobalt, and I want them to be in Northeast Wisconsin, and I also only want to pay them $60,000 a year. Do you have to go through all that stuff? Do you learn about the mission and the vision of each company? And then is there ever a time where you're like you kind of have to give that pushback and go, hey, I know this industry. You're not going to find that person at that price point. Like, how does the interaction kind of go with the discovery?
So, as my approach off the bat is consultative and earnest listening, actually hearing what the problems are and seeking to understand. I do find that most of the leaders that I work with, and they tend to be within technology, sometimes finance, sometimes HR, it varies. But the more open that we can be with one another, the greater the success we tend to have. That said, there's going to be constraints in different ways, and recognizing the priorities and how they're weighted from the company's vision or from the company's roadmaps. Roadmaps really reveal a lot. So if we can talk about the business roadmap and what the challenges are that we're seeking to tackle in that capacity, or the technology roadmaps, usually both hand in hand, but recognizing what those are, then we can start talking about an actual person that is going to remedy the challenges, but also continue to contribute once that project or that year and a half is kind of out of the way at the same time.
Gotcha. Okay. And I guess we're maybe pivoting a little bit here, but as you're searching for these security professionals, or even director level, C-suite level people in cybersecurity, engineering, I guess wherever, like, how much do certifications versus hands-on experience and kind of really what's like when they weigh it out, do you determine that, or does the company kind of weigh that out, or do you have to do some convincing? Because there's some great leaders out there and people that don't have the degree, don't have a certification, or people that I've seen actually in IT and cybersecurity that can do all this stuff. They just don't have the fancy letters after their name. So what does that kind of look like when you're recruiting?
I think this is one of the old questions that continues to come up in different forums, and it's interesting. I do think the number of hours spent within security and tackling some of these challenges speaks volumes at the end of the day. So I'd rather see the real world experience. Having gone through cybersecurity certifications and classes, a lot of it didn't work the first time around. So it's getting familiar with how it breaks, why it breaks, how to remedy it, and being able to troubleshoot through various things. And given I'm speaking a little bit more towards application and network security, but as far as the certifications, well, we're in a part of the country that's definitely a Microsoft-heavy area.
Sure, yeah.
A lot of my work in the past has been open source, back in the Bay and back on the West Coast, with a lot more Amazon, a lot more Linux-based systems and that type of thing. But I do think that there's a nice element with being Microsoft heavy here, Azure, and being able to be plug and play within different environments.
Yeah.
Those certifications do carry some weight, but if I saw somebody that just had certifications, only certifications, doesn't have real world experience, I would probably see that resume lesser than I would in contrast to somebody that has real world experience.
Sure.
There's certain certs that are the gold standard, so the CISSP. If you're a CISO, I would expect that you generally have a CISSP. Traditionally there's been a lot of Cisco focus, Cisco equipment, and now the Meraki division acquisition of theirs. I do think that we're starting to see a transition into different technologies. I'm actually working on a project for data centers transformations for across the country with Arista. So Arista is definitely cutting edge technology, and so some of the Cisco product is being sunset in favor of Arista at this point in time. Certifications in each setting, situation, I would say, needs to be judged individually. But overall, it shows a continuation of somebody pursuing education. And one of the things that I really try to discern is this person hungry? Are they intellectually curious? Because I do believe that intellectual curiosity is at the pinnacle of being a good cybersecurity professional.
That makes sense. It feels like I don't want to say it in a bad way, but it feels like a game sometimes. You know what I mean? Like that you kind of got to figure out the puzzle of, okay, does this person just have the cert to have the cert because they were, job hunting and like, hey, this might be a good thing, but they've never had that hands-on experience. But then it's hard to sit. I know even for us, sit in a meeting and, hey, we have this environment. Can you guys support it? Like, yeah, we have in the past. Like, do you have anything that can show that you can support it? We're like, well, we have a customer that says we can support it, but we don't have the cert. And they're like, well, we don't really feel comfortable. Not that this happened a lot, but like, we'd like you to get the cert for us. Like, okay, sounds good. We'll go get it. But it kind of feels like that, kind of game when it comes to customers. But, essentially you want to serve whoever you're serving, right? So if it's the business or whatever, like if that's a priority for them, that you have the cert, that's fine, but they usually our IT guys at least are like excited about getting something new like that because they're like, ooh, this makes me more valuable, over time, or now I have another badge to kind of put on. So
for sure, yeah. And I'll add 2 points to your original question on that. So GIAC is a cybersecurity certification authority, if you would, that I would definitely encourage. The certifications are not cheap, but they definitely carry substantial weight. Probably $3,500 per certification, and they've definitely developed quite a solid reputation for being a gold standard, especially in contrast to some of the others that I've seen. And second to that, you asked about the education piece earlier. My personal take is, if it's a solid software engineer these days, I don't necessarily believe that they need the education. I do see that to be the case in more leading cutting edge companies. But again, there's individuals that might be a co-founder that's come from Stanford and that are really harking on them coming from a top 20 research university with a CS degree.
Sure.
But I think in general, across IT, business applications, cybersecurity, I don't see a defining need for that person to have a formalized education. I mean, half of the education in the first place isn't spent in what they're there to study.
Yeah, exactly.
But they should have an ability to communicate and back up the work that they've done. Yeah,
absolutely. So we're going to pivot a little bit into ageism in technology. I know you got some passion around this, so just kind of curious what brought this passion up, and if you can just speak on it a little bit, because I think it's an interesting topic, not being in the field myself that long in the IT field and cybersecurity. So, why the passion around that topic?
Oh, well.
Very open-ended question, just super broad, sorry.
No. It's a great question. It's definitely a topic that requires more attention, and I think it has gained traction over the past 4 or 5 years. I think especially with COVID and looking at some of the economical data and labor participation, some of the individuals that have come out of retirement in part due to inflation and some of the macro elements in that regard is also an interesting thing to look at. But technology has moved so fast and continues to iterate to the fact that staying up to date requires quite a lot of effort in the first place. Somebody that's doing SQL Server development is not, you aren't seeing that in certain parts of the country anymore. It's all cloud-based and maybe NoSQL variety, or even now you've got vector-based databases for AI and graph databases, which are much more bleeding edge, cutting edge technology. And so it does leave certain demographics behind.
Yeah.
And there's an apprehension to hire some people in the, like boomers, that might not be deemed to keep up to date as readily. And I'll be honest, I'm just turned 40. My energy today is not quite the same as it was when I was 30. Obviously, starting a company when I'm 40 with 2 brand new kids comes with its own challenges at the same time. But to dismiss hiring somebody who is older is not, it is blatantly wrong at the end of the day. So drawing some attention to this, being able to, I think there's certain recruiters or internal HR might end up looking at certain profiles and dismiss them because they're a bit older or that they're at the end of their career. And this isn't necessarily explicitly towards software or IT. This is across the board. But I do think that within tech specifically, you see those that are aged out.
So what are they missing out on? What are some of the things that those people can bring to the table that maybe these teams are just not going to experience because of that kind of ageism that's taking place?
So a healthy culture doesn't necessarily look the same each way, but there are defining characteristics, I would say, within a business where one can look and say, okay, this is a business that is operating in a healthy capacity from a cultural stance. And I think having a range of ages definitely helps in that, as it does with having a range of individuals from diverse backgrounds. And we can look at the DEI over the past couple of years, and whether you are for or against it, I do think that it brings a certain awareness to conversation. And it does open up people's ideas that other people should be valued regardless of what their opinions are. And looking at an older generation, they've obviously been around and seen more. They've probably had greater exposure to different companies and think in different ways. I actually recently posted something on LinkedIn how different demographics are motivated by different aspects. I'll add a personal note to this. We actually moved here in part to live in more of an intergenerational dynamic. So my parents-in-law, who are pretty awesome with our kids, which is also a nice added plus, just bring in a different element. And I think it's helped me realize where I fit into the larger picture. And not having that older generation, it brings a little bit more ego to the table. So I think having that vast range of individuals within a workplace really is supportive of developing growth in a nuanced way that it might not be seen so readily up front, but it removes that sense of ego from other people and can keep a more harmonious balance in the culture for them.
Yeah, that can be, I would assume, tough because it's not always the measurable things, you know what I mean, that you can kind of see when you're adding to that. And there's also that aspect, I was told from early on when I started building a team, like, you're going to want to hire the people that are just like you, like all the time. Like, oh yeah, that guy's really great. Oh yeah, he's just like me, which sounds really bad. but when you look at that aspect, I think it's kind of challenging to go against what you might value personally all the time, when you're building a team, which is going to kind of transition into our last question here as we wrap up. What are companies doing wrong when it comes to hiring, and why, from a security standpoint or security professionals? And then, why do you think someone should go with a place like Proper Recruiting versus maybe building that individual, that team on their own?
So, to answer the first half of the question about security and hiring, it's approaching hiring from where the company wants to be within the next 5 years in this environment is of paramount importance. With the technology adoption, with operational technology, and I didn't get into this with you, but with operational technology and IT, we are starting to see an emergence of the separation and air gap between the two, where security individuals in a 100-person manufacturing company needs to start envisioning the separation of HMIs, PLCs, robotics, and that of the network infrastructure, and really start to carve out and become a subject matter expert in that side of the business. Mm-hmm. I would say the other place, and where I do a ton of work also, is on the data side. Having an individual that can think about the data and think about security for the business and develop that from a strategical stance and be empowered within the business, I think is where companies really need to place some effort today. Because as we acquire more and more technology and more of this is going towards the cloud, I think a lot of businesses are losing track of where we're actually heading. So hiring somebody that is more strategic but can be down in the weeds as an individual contributor and work to build out these types of organizations is where I would encourage businesses to be looking today. As far as Proper Recruiting, we've done a lot of business here in the Green Bay Metro, in Northeast Wisconsin, and will continue to do so over the next couple of years. Really wanting to bring some of this awareness that is awareness around technology that's advancing at such a rate to this part of the country. And we'll be growing in Q1, Q2 next year and bringing on some additional resources. We're going to be here for the long term, and our focus is helping companies modernize into Industry 4.0, helping companies really grow into that next step of the company's growth plan with sound hiring and sound awareness around technology adoption.
Yeah. I think the future planning and the consultative approach is so beneficial rather than the, plug and play, hey, this is the guy. And I'm excited that we have people in the space that are passionate about it, like you are, and, individuals that we can kind of lean on as, this whole technology sector and security sector continues to evolve. So thanks so much for joining me for this conversation.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate your expertise in the area and what you're doing to make a difference, bringing the right people into the right companies in this area. So,
well, thank you, Brandon. Thank you for your time. And very excited to be here and looking forward to being able to give back to the community.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us on IT Unplugged. Make sure you like, subscribe, and check out our other videos going forward for everything entrepreneurship, IT, security related. Thanks so much.